The neon sign above Belle's Diner flickered against the steady downpour, casting a dull glow onto the rain-slicked pavement. Inside, the warm scent of coffee and grilled cheese lingered in the air, a stark contrast to the bitter cold outside. The place had been quieter than usual that evening, just the usual late-night stragglers, a trucker nursing his third cup of black coffee, an old man flipping through a damp newspaper, and a pair of students huddled in a corner, drowning in textbooks. Rachel Carter wiped down the counter, her movements slow, methodical. Her feet ached, a dull reminder of another 14-hour shift. It wasn't much of a life: minimum wage, endless bills, and a future that stretched out like an empty road. But it was hers. And despite everything, she had never lost her instinct to care. As she reached for a fresh towel, something caught her eye through the rain-streaked window. A small lone figure hunched against the diner's brick wall. The boy sat motionless in a wheelchair, his frail frame wrapped in an oversized, threadbare jacket. Dark, soaking hair clung to his forehead. Even through the fogged-up glass, Rachel could see his wide, uncertain eyes scanning the street. He wasn't waiting for a bus. He was waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Rachel didn't think, she just moved. Grabbing a dry towel, she pushed open the diner door, wincing as a gust of wind sent icy droplets against her skin. "Hey, sweetheart," she called softly, crouching beside the boy. Her voice barely carried over the rain. "You okay out here?" The boy's head snapped up, startled. His hands clenched the armrests of his wheelchair. I'm waiting," he murmured, voice small, hesitant. Rachel's chest tightened. She glanced down the street, empty sidewalks, parked cars glistening under the streetlights, but no sign of a guardian. "You're freezing." Rachel shook out the towel, gently draping it over his shoulders. "Come on inside, it's warm. And I make a mean grilled cheese." For a moment, he hesitated. Rachel saw it, the instinct to refuse, the ingrained fear of trusting strangers. But then he nodded. Rachel stood and took the handles of his wheelchair, guiding him into the diner. She didn't know his story yet. But she knew one thing for sure: tonight, he wouldn't have to wait alone. The rain had not let up. It drummed steadily against the sleek black SUV parked across the street, the windshield wipers sweeping back and forth in a slow rhythmic motion. Alexander Drake sat in the back seat, his sharp gray eyes fixed on the diner's window, watching. Inside, the woman moved with an effortless kind of kindness, her hand steady as she placed a steaming plate in front of the boy, tucking a napkin into his lap like a mother would. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't asked questions. She had simply helped. Alexander leaned back into the plush leather seat, his fingers tapping against the armrest in an uncharacteristic display of restlessness. He had seen many things in his life: boardrooms filled with men in tailored suits, lawyers negotiating deals worth millions, politicians vying for his favor. What he hadn't seen in a long time was pure, uncalculated kindness. His jaw tightened as he exhaled slowly. He had run Drake Industries for over 2 decades, turning it into one of the most powerful tech empires in the country. He had built his fortune through strategy, control, and an unshakable belief that people always wanted something in return. No one did anything for free. And yet, this woman had. Rachel Carter. He didn't know her name yet, but that wouldn't take long. He never let questions go unanswered. He glanced at the boy, the frail child in the wheelchair, now smiling faintly as the woman spoke to him. Ethan. His son. His only son. A muscle flickered in Alexander's jaw. He wasn't supposed to be here alone. Earlier that evening, Ethan's caregiver had taken him to a therapy session downtown. He was supposed to return straight home, back to the penthouse overlooking the city, the world Alexander had meticulously built for him, where nothing could touch him, where no one could hurt him. But something had gone wrong. Ethan had wandered off. And when Alexander's security team finally tracked him down, he was sitting in a rundown diner, eating a sandwich made by a woman who didn't even know who he was. Didn't know whose son she was feeding. For a moment, something strange settled in Alexander's chest, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself in years. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something closer to awe. How long had it been since someone had treated Ethan like this? Not as the heir to a billion-dollar empire. Not as Alexander Drake's disabled son. Just as a child. His phone buzzed. He barely glanced at the screen before answering. Talk. Sir, we have the information you requested. Clara, his assistant, always efficient, always ahead of the game. Her name is Rachel Carter. 30 years old. Works full-time at Bell's Diner. No criminal record, no significant assets, barely scraping by. She's lived in New Orleans her whole life. Never went to college. Parents deceased. No immediate family. Alexander listened in silence, his gaze still locked on the diner. A nobody, on paper. But tonight, in this moment, she had been everything. Clara hesitated before continuing. Should I move forward with the background check? Alexander didn't answer right away. He should have said yes. He always did. People needed to be vetted, assessed, understood before they were allowed into his world. But for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking like a CEO. He was thinking like a father. No, he said finally, his voice quieter than usual. Not yet. A beat of silence. Clara had worked for him long enough to recognize the shift in his tone, but she didn't question it. Understood, sir. The call ended, but Alexander remained where he was, watching. Rachel Carter had no idea that her small act of kindness was about to change her life forever. And for the first time in a long time, Alexander found himself wondering if she might change his too. The next morning, Rachel Carter stood outside Bell's Diner, rubbing her arms against the crisp autumn air. It had rained through the night, leaving behind a city still glistening under the soft morning sun. Normally, she would have gone straight inside, tied on her apron, and started another long shift. But today wasn't normal. Her eyes drifted back to the sleek black car parked across the street. It had been there for at least 20 minutes, unmoving, the tinted windows concealing whoever was inside. Rachel knew enough about the world to recognize when she was being watched. She swallowed hard as the back door finally opened. A woman stepped out, dressed in a neatly tailored gray suit, the kind that didn't belong in this part of town. She was tall, sharp-featured, and efficient-looking, the type of person who could command a room without saying a word. Rachel felt her stomach tighten. The woman approached with a businesslike stride, stopping just a few feet away. Rachel Carter. Rachel hesitated before nodding. Yeah, who's asking? The woman smiled, a professional, unreadable expression. My name is Clara. I work for Alexander Drake. He'd like to meet with you. Rachel blinked. Who? Clara's brow lifted ever so slightly. Mr. Drake. CEO of Drake Industries. Rachel let out a short, humorless laugh. Right. And why exactly does a billionaire want to meet a waitress from Bell's Diner? Clara remained unfazed. He'll explain himself. The car is ready to take you. Rachel stiffened. Every instinct in her body screamed that this was insane. Who in their right mind would get into a stranger's car, let alone one sent by a billionaire? This had to be some kind of mistake. Yeah, no thanks, she said, shifting her weight. I have a shift to get to. Clara didn't react. She simply pulled out a crisp white envelope and held it out. He anticipated you'd say that. This is compensation for the shift you'd be missing. Rachel hesitated before taking the envelope. Inside was a check, more than enough to cover an entire week of work. Her breath caught. What the hell kind of meeting was this? Her gut told her to walk away. But curiosity, and the undeniable weight of that check, made her waver. She exhaled sharply. Fine. But if this turns out to be some scam, I'm walking. Clara simply nodded. Of course. Rachel had never felt more out of place. The lobby of Drake Industries was a masterpiece of marble floors, glass walls, and quiet efficiency. Men and women in perfectly pressed suits moved with purpose, their conversations hushed but urgent. She stuck out like a sore thumb, her faded jeans, worn-out sneakers, and thrift store jacket looking like relics from another world. The elevator ride felt impossibly long. By the time the doors slid open on the top floor, her nerves were frayed. Clara led her into an office so large it could have fit the entire diner inside. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline, and behind a sleek obsidian desk sat the man himself. Alexander Drake barely glanced up as they entered. He was even more intimidating up close, salt and pepper hair neatly combed back, a tailored black suit that looked like it cost more than her entire life. But what unsettled her most was his calm, unreadable expression. "Miss Carter," he said, finally looking at her. "Take a seat." Rachel hesitated before lowering herself into the chair across from him, her back stiff. "So, is this the part where you tell me why I'm here?" Alexander studied her, steepling his fingers. "I want to offer you a job." Rachel blinked, then laughed. "A job? Doing what?" "I'm a waitress." A waitress, he mused, who didn't hesitate to help a child in the rain. A woman who gave without expecting anything in return. That's rare. Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Alexander said, his gaze unwavering. "You didn't." Silence settled between them. Rachel shook her head. "Look, whatever this is, I think you've got the wrong person. I don't belong here. I don't know anything about the corporate world. And I sure as hell don't know why a billionaire thinks I'm worth hiring." Alexander leaned forward slightly. "I don't need someone who understands business, Rachel. I need someone who understands people." The weight of his words settled over her. Still, it was absurd. Completely surreal. She stood abruptly. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to have to pass." For the first time, Alexander's expression flickered. "You won't even think about it?" Rachel exhaled, pressing her palms against the desk. "I don't belong in your world. And we both know it." Alexander studied her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. "Fair enough," he said smoothly. "Take a week. Consider it. My assistant will be in touch." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "I told you I'm not." "1 week," he repeated. "No pressure. No strings." Rachel hesitated. A week wouldn't hurt, right? But deep down she knew, the moment she'd stepped into this office, her life had already begun to change. Rachel Carter had always known she didn't belong in places like this. The offices of Drake Industries felt like an entirely different universe. Sleek, modern, efficient, filled with high-powered executives who spoke in sharp, clipped tones and moved like they were always 5 steps ahead of the world. It was nothing like the warmth of Belle's diner, where conversations flowed as easily as the coffee and where she could read people with a single glance. Here, she was a stranger in a foreign land. And they made sure she knew it. From the moment she walked into the building on her first day as Alexander Drake's personal assistant, she could feel the eyes on her. Assessing, judging, doubting. She wasn't stupid, she knew exactly what they were thinking. Who is she? Why is she here? The whispers were quiet, but not quiet enough. She's just a waitress. She must have something on Mr. Drake. This is a joke, right? Rachel pretended not to hear. But the words lodged in her chest like tiny shards of glass. She wasn't sure why she had agreed to this job in the first place. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way Ethan had smiled at her that night in the diner, like she was the first person who had really seen him. Maybe, just maybe, it was because, for once in her life, someone had looked at her and seen potential, not just another person struggling to get by. But if Alexander Drake thought she would just sit pretty in a corner and take up space, he had another thing coming. Her first official task wasn't some menial errand, it was a trial by fire. Alexander had given her 24 hours to prepare a report on a multi-million-dollar contract negotiation. "Do your research," he had said coolly, sliding a thick file toward her. "I expect your insights by tomorrow." Rachel had stared at him, dumbfounded. "Are you serious? I don't know the first thing about contract negotiations." "Then learn," Alexander replied, already turning his attention back to his work. "Or don't. But if you want to prove you deserve to be here, this is how you do it." Rachel had wanted to throw the file right back at him. Instead, she had spent the entire night poring over legal jargon, case studies, and company reports, her eyes burning from exhaustion by the time the sun rose. When she walked into his office the next morning, she was running on caffeine and sheer stubbornness. Alexander didn't even look up as she placed the report on his desk. 5 agonizing minutes passed as he read through her notes. The silence stretched so long that Rachel was convinced she had completely failed. Finally, he leaned back and fixed her with an unreadable stare. "You missed several key factors," he said, his tone neutral. "But your insights on competitor strategy were surprisingly sharp." Rachel's breath caught. That wasn't praise, exactly. But coming from him? It was something. "Rewrite it," Alexander continued, handing the report back to her. "Make it better." Rachel swallowed her pride and nodded. She could do this. She would do this. But the challenges didn't stop there. Her coworkers wanted nothing to do with her. Executives barely acknowledged her presence. Assistants whispered behind her back. Some were outright hostile, making sure to let her know she hadn't earned her place. One day, as she entered the break room, the conversation stopped abruptly. She caught a few words before silence fell. "She's just here because of the kid." "How long do you think before she gets fired?" Rachel clenched her fists. Let them talk. She had survived worse. But doubt still crept in. What was she doing here? Did she actually believe she could hold her own in this world? Maybe Alexander had made a mistake. Maybe she had made a mistake. Then one evening, Ethan called her. His voice was bright, excited. "Rachel, I started reading that book you told me about. The one with the pirate who..." Rachel let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She closed her eyes and smiled. That was why she was still here. Not for the money. Not for the title. But because she had made a difference to someone who needed it. She wasn't going to quit. Not yet. And when Rachel Carter made up her mind about something, not even a billionaire's world could push her out. The tension in Drake Industries was palpable. Whispers spread like wildfire, moving through the hallways and conference rooms in hushed, urgent tones. Something had happened, something big. Rachel Carter could feel it before she even knew what it was. The shift in the air, the lingering glances from her colleagues, the way people stepped aside when she passed, as if she had suddenly become untouchable. Then Clara appeared at her desk, her usual composed expression tight with something unspoken. "Mr. Drake needs to see you." Rachel frowned. "Right now?" Clara nodded once. "Immediately." A chill ran down her spine. She set her notepad aside and stood, her stomach twisting in knots. This wasn't a routine meeting. Something was wrong. Alexander Drake's office felt colder than usual. He sat behind his imposing desk, back straight, hands folded neatly in front of him. His gray eyes, normally unreadable, were darker, sharper. A storm was brewing behind them. Rachel barely had time to sit before he slid a thick folder toward her. "Read it," he said, voice controlled but distant. Rachel hesitated before opening it. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. A detailed report on a data breach, marked confidential, outlining how classified company information had been leaked to a direct competitor. Millions of dollars lost. Contracts compromised. Trust shattered. And then, her name. Highlighted. Circled. The prime suspect. Rachel's breath caught. Her head snapped up. You think I did this? Alexander's gaze didn't waver. A witness saw you speaking with someone from Evertech last week. A man named David Coulson. He used to frequent your diner, correct? Rachel's pulse pounded in her ears. David, she repeated, stunned. Yes, he used to come in sometimes, but that was before I even started working here. He was just a regular customer. What does that have to do with anything? Alexander leaned back, fingers steepled. He's the lead negotiator for Evertech's legal division. And now, Evertech mysteriously has insider knowledge of our deals. The timing is convenient, don't you think? Rachel shook her head, disbelief hitting her like a freight train. You seriously think what? Sold company secrets over coffee? Alexander's expression remained unreadable. I think you need to explain why you were speaking to him in the first place. Rachel's stomach clenched. He recognized me when I was at the diner last week. He asked about my new job. I didn't think anything of it. He's just a guy who used to tip well and talk about baseball. I didn't even know what department he worked in. Alexander exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. He wasn't convinced. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. You don't believe me. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. Alexander hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Rachel felt her chest tighten, an ache spreading through her ribs like something breaking. She had worked her ass off. She had endured the whispers, the doubt, the sleepless nights, the uphill battle of proving herself in a world that never wanted her there in the first place. And now, the one person who had given her this opportunity didn't even trust her. Rachel, Alexander said, his tone softer now. This is serious. If you're involved. Her chair scraped against the polished floor as she stood abruptly. I'm not involved. Her voice was sharp, trembling with anger. But you know what? It doesn't even matter what I say, does it? You've already made up your mind. Alexander's jaw tightened. I wouldn't be asking if I had already made up my mind. Rachel let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Oh, come on, Alexander. You didn't hire me because you believed in me. You hired me because you wanted to test me. And now that something's gone wrong, I'm just the easiest target, aren't I? Silence. For the first time since stepping into his office, Alexander looked away. Rachel swallowed against the bitter taste of betrayal. If you really think I did this, she said, voice quieter now, then fire me. Call security. Do whatever it is men like you do to people like me when we stop being useful. Alexander stared at her, his expression unreadable. But he didn't say a word. Rachel's hands trembled as she turned on her heel. She was done begging to be seen. And if Alexander Drake had already decided she was guilty, then she would prove her innocence herself. Rachel Carter had never been one to sit back and accept defeat. If Alexander Drake thought she would just disappear quietly, he had seriously underestimated her. The accusation had shaken her, but it hadn't broken her. She knew she was innocent. And if no one else was going to prove it, she would do it herself. She spent the next 2 days watching, listening, piecing things together. The whispers in the office hadn't stopped, but now Rachel paid closer attention. And the more she listened, the clearer the patterns became. Something wasn't right. People avoided certain names in conversations. A few employees seemed too eager to place blame on her. And then there was Vincent Calloway, a senior executive whose name had come up just a little too often in the background of this mess. Rachel didn't know much about corporate espionage, but she knew when someone was hiding something. And Vincent? He was hiding a lot. It was a stormy night, much like the one where she had first met Ethan. The halls of Drake Industries were mostly empty by the time Rachel slipped back into the building. Security was light after hours. No one expected a waitress-turned-assistant to be a threat. She moved quickly, heart pounding, her footsteps silent against the marble floors. She had one shot at this. Vincent's office was locked, but Rachel had spent too many years in a world where locks didn't always mean keep out. A well-placed hairpin and a little luck later, she was inside. Her hands trembled as she booted up his computer. Minutes passed. Files loaded. And then, she found it. Emails. Transactions. A trail leading straight to Evertech. Vincent had orchestrated the leak. And he had made sure Rachel took the fall. Rachel snapped photos of everything before shutting down the computer. Then, a voice behind her. "You shouldn't be here, Carter." She spun around, and there stood Vincent, his expression dark. Rachel's pulse spiked, but she didn't let fear show. She straightened her shoulders. "Neither should you," she said, holding up her phone. "But now we both know the truth, don't we?" Rachel stormed into Alexander Drake's office before security could throw her out. He looked up, his gaze sharp. "Rachel, what?" She slammed her phone on his desk. "Look at it." Alexander hesitated, then picked up the device. Silence. Then, his jaw clenched. His eyes darkened. "This is real?" he asked, voice low. Rachel crossed her arms. "You tell me, boss." A long pause. Then, finally, Alexander exhaled. "I was wrong." Rachel didn't let herself savor the moment. "Not yet." "Damn right you were." Now there was only one thing left to do, make Vincent pay. The air inside Drake Industries' boardroom felt lighter than it had in weeks. The scandal had finally been exposed. Vincent Calloway was out. His betrayal had cost the company millions, but more than that, it had cost Alexander his trust in his own judgment. And Rachel Carter? She had proven every single one of them wrong. Yet, as she stood across from Alexander Drake now, she wasn't feeling victorious. She was waiting. Waiting for him to say what she knew was coming. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. For the first time since she had met him, he looked uncertain. "I made a mistake," he admitted, voice quiet but firm. "I shouldn't have doubted you." Rachel crossed her arms. "No, you shouldn't have." Silence stretched between them. Alexander met her gaze, steady, unguarded. "I know an apology isn't enough," he continued, leaning forward slightly. "So I'm offering you something more. A permanent role here, not as my assistant, but as an ethics advisor for the company." Rachel blinked. She had expected an apology. She hadn't expected this. "You want me to do what?" "Ensure something like this doesn't happen again," Alexander said, his tone serious. "Help change the way this company operates, from the inside out." Rachel scoffed. "You really think I belong in a room full of people who still think I don't deserve to be here?" "That's exactly why you should be in the room," Alexander countered. "They were wrong about you, Rachel." "I was wrong. But you see people in a way that most of them never will. That's what this company needs." She studied him for a long moment. For the first time since she had stepped into his world, he wasn't talking like a billionaire. He was talking like a man who was finally listening. Rachel took a slow breath. She wasn't saying yes. "Not yet. Things have to change," she said firmly. "Starting with how you treat the people who work for you. You want me on board? Then I need to know you're serious about making this company better, not just for show but for real." A flicker of something crossed Alexander's face, surprise, then respect. "Done," he said. Rachel hadn't expected him to agree so quickly. She narrowed her eyes. "And I mean it, Drake. No more blind trust in the people at the top while the ones at the bottom get walked over. If I take this job, I do it my way." Alexander's lips twitched slightly, the closest thing to a smile she had ever seen from him. "I wouldn't expect anything less." A few days later, Rachel found herself exactly where she needed to be. Not in a boardroom. Not in a corporate office. but in the middle of City Park, sitting on a bench next to Ethan. The late afternoon sun cast golden light across the playground, where kids ran across the grass, their laughter filling the air. Ethan tilted his head toward her. "So, are you gonna work with my dad now?" Rachel let out a small laugh. "Still thinking about it." Ethan grinned. "I think you should." "Oh yeah." She arched a brow. "Why's that?" He shrugged, kicking his feet a little. "Because he listens to you. Nobody else tells him when he's wrong." Rachel chuckled. "Yeah, well, somebody's gotta do it." Ethan's eyes softened. "I'm glad it's you." Rachel's chest tightened. This kid had no idea how much he had changed her life. For the longest time, she had thought she was just a waitress in a world that didn't care. But she had been wrong. Because kindness mattered. And sometimes, one small act of it could change everything. Rachel smiled, ruffling Ethan's hair as they watched the sun sink lower in the sky. She still didn't know exactly what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Life has a way of surprising us. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness, a warm meal, a gentle word, a moment of genuine care, can change the course of someone's life forever. Rachel Carter didn't set out to change her destiny. She wasn't looking for opportunity, recognition, or wealth. She simply did what was right. And in return, life placed her on a path she never expected. This story reminds us that kindness is never wasted. You never know who is watching, who is listening, or how your actions might ripple into something far greater than you could ever imagine. Trust, once broken, is hard to repair, but redemption is possible. Alexander Drake learned that power and success mean little if you cannot recognize the value of the people around you. His world changed not because of wealth, but because of one woman's unwavering integrity. So ask yourself, when was the last time you did something kind with no expectation of reward? If this story inspired you, like and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales about the power of human connection. Turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of inspiration.